another episode of Officeology. We're going to, in this episode and a couple others, we're going to look at just some of the individual Old Testament classes in the curriculum here at Mid-America Reformed Seminary. You may remember in a previous episode we gave something of an overview to how we do that discipline here at Mid-America. And what we're going to do in these next few episodes is just take a quick little view at how we approach the individual exegesis classes here at Mid-America. The first class we'll be looking at is kind of the first in number, and in some ways the first of the Old Testament canonical order, but it's our class called Interpretation of Revelation Before the Monarchy. You can see how we've kind of organized it historically, and so we're looking at this material from books that take place before the establishment of the monarchy under Saul, even. Now, it doesn't exactly line up. It's not as though we cover everything from Genesis into the midpoint of 1 Samuel in this first class. We do sort of emphasize the initial 5 books, the books of the Pentateuch, and part of that is because those books are so foundational for the rest of the Old Testament. Not only do they set the historical context out of which the monarchy flows, and out of which the theocracy gets established in that monarchical form and such, but those major theological emphases that will be cited by later Old Testament writers get established in these opening books. So the class really does drill down into the theological emphases of the books of the Pentateuch. And at the same time, it also is trying to put the foundation in place for a robust, redemptive, historical, biblical, theological approach to all of Old Testament exegesis. We really start off understanding what Geerhardus Voss called the periodicity of Old Testament revelation. In fact, the periodicity of all revelation and all redemptive history. But here we start to see those initial forms of it as we begin in Genesis, in many cases outside the land. And it's only with Exodus that we start getting the constitution for life in the land. And though Deuteronomy doesn't quite bring us into the land yet, we're already starting to see some of the distinctives of the theocracy and how they relate to other periods of the Old Testament. I think one of the things that we try to do here at Mid-America is approach this class in particular, but all of them with a really strong redemptive historical approach. We assign all of Geerhardus Voss's biblical theology, the Old and New Testament. This is a challenging book of his, and a lot of people have even joked that if only he had just written it in Dutch and then somebody had translated it into English, it might have been easier. But having said that, it's an incredibly stimulating setting forth of this distinctively reformed, confessional, biblical theological approach. And so, in fact, throughout the curriculum, we assign the 2 Old Testament portions of this, and then really try to let that set the parameters for the discussion. But at the same time, we here at Mid-America are trying to work broadly within that as well. And another writer who we spend a lot of time with is Meredith Kline. And part of why we do this is it helps to show what we're trying to do as a seminary. We are aiming for something of the confessional consensus here. And the reason I mention Meredith Kline in this way is because he was in some ways a very novel thinker, and in other ways a very traditional thinker. And in this regard, he's somewhat of a polarizing figure as well. Some people think everything that Kline has written is very poor and not helpful to the church. Other people think that everything Kline has written is really what theologians and what the church ought to be doing. And what we're trying to do here is really let this tradition of Reformed biblical theology play out, so that we can see where Kline is in fact doing things very traditionally, and where he is getting even overly novel. We're not here to sort of lionize him, nor are we here to demonize him. And I think that approach then, and I'm picking the name of Kline to discuss it, but we do this with a range of other writers as well. We're not here as a seminary, and especially in this pre-monarchy course, trying to just pick one or two thinkers who won't challenge our categories and then just, settle down on them. No, we're trying to interact with thinkers in an academic environment where we can see true advancements, true work that's building on the work of Voss, which I think in many ways is rooted in his systematic theological work back into the Protestant scholastics and even earlier writers than that. But we're seeing how there's advancements that can be made on Voss, but also how we can stay rooted to this confessional Reformed approach to biblical, theological, and redemptive historical interpretation.